Okay, I'll also be answering everything from the perspective of an OWLS member. So for anyone in Asgard, OWLS, they have, I think on Tuesdays they get free heat map access, but just on the Discord, like the Discord version. So sometimes the way they go about pulling up some of these maps and the way they backtest is a little bit different than, anyone that's in Asgard. So I'll be answering all the questions from a Discord heat map perspective, but for anyone that's in Asgard, obviously you can just do the same thing on the website UI. So same thing, end of the day. Bell, Bell, you have to go yeah, go pray about Wemby. That parlay is chalk. Um Bell, I told you not to do that. He wasn't in my slip. All right. So who's on the other side? Jay, you're in Free Owls Discord. Can I still access Heatseeker on free days? Yeah, Jay, so you should be able to. I think it's Tuesdays. Is it Fridays as well? I think it's Tuesdays and Fridays. S- so yeah, you should be able to within the Owls Discord, like in the Heatseeker section, there's a bunch of SPX, SPY, QQQ heat maps and a Heatseeker bot. If you need to know how to use those, go to the Heatseeker analysis channel and within the pinned comments. Oh, wait, never mind. That's not pinned. Wait, let me go pin it right now. I put up a video like how to actually navigate it. And I just pinned it right now. So that should help you know how to utilize the bots correctly. So Jay, that should cover your question. What's up, Blair? And then Sky, is this gonna be posted in hours? No, it'll be posted to my YouTube, and I'll send the video. I'll send the link within the Discord, Sky. So you should be able to do that. All right, give me a second here. So again, these any questions y'all have, just start firing them off. And I'll start just covering them, right? It's supposed to be sort of open forum, so y'all can throw out any questions you may have. And the whole goal here is just any gaps during the day, or if it's just any general questions you have about how to use the heat seeker, I'm happy to answer any of those. So yeah, I'll let y'all get started. Whether it's through Zoom or Discord, y'all can just sort of start firing off any questions. Dubai Kid, can I show an example of a rug setup? Yeah, of a rug setup. Uh, okay, wait. Jay, I don't know if they've opened access for it yet. Can you message in Heatseeker support, Jay? And then I think Jewel is able to open up the access for it. I don't know how he does it, but he should be able to do it. So that should open up that should let you type it in because I know tomorrow's Tuesday, so I think Monday night they'll usually give access so you guys can sort of go check heat maps at night and, be ready to use it for the morning. All right. So Dubai Kid, I'm sharing my screen. I'm sharing my screen on Zoom and Discord, right? All right, so for a rug setup, I guess we can just use a replay. I don't actually know if there was one today, but let's check. Actually, I'll use an example from last week. I think last week had a couple good ones. So it might have been here on 585. Yeah, maybe it was 340 on Thursday. Let me give it a look here. No, that actually wasn't a rug pull. All right, sorry, I'm having to scroll around here a second. All right, let's check Monday. Looks like Monday we might have had one around 150. Yeah, so SPY we had one. All right. Yeah, this is a good enough example. If not, I guess I'll do the one at 11. Oh, never mind, that wasn't a rug pull. All right, so who asked this? Oh, Dubai Kid. Yeah, so rug pulls essentially are going to be when we have positive volume on top of negative volume. So when you look at SPY in this instance, And I think I can sketch for everyone that's on Zoom. I can sort of draw these lines. Yeah, this will be nice. All right. So me not push up into this rug pull. Yeah. So over here, Dubai Kid, when you look at SPY, right, what we have here is we have this positive node up top at 640, and then we have these three negative nodes, right? But a rug pull really just means that we have one positive node over one negative. Like, yes, if we have extra negatives below or if we have extra positives above, that, that can still be a rug pull. But at its core, or like at the minimum, you just need one positive above, one negative below, right? And what happens here is as price pushes upwards, right? Starts hitting into the negative node. A lot of times these negative nodes, we not a lot of times, the general behavior is that it increases volatility. So what happens is it's very likely to overshoot the level itself. So what's happening on a rug pull is we overshoot that negative node, tap into the positive node above, and then both of those end up rejecting price back down, right? Because the positive node deflects it, just like your normal rejection, but the negative node has that overshoot and then sort of like a rubber band effect back down, right? So that's the simplest way to think about it. This example is okay. It's actually not my favorite because we didn't actually get all the way up here, right? Like usually for the rug pulls, we're waiting for either the positive node or at least like the midpoint between the negative and positive to tap. So this was definitely an example of like we rejected it early off of that. But I can try to send you a better recap, Dubai Kid. Just DM me on Discord, and I should be able to cover that there. And also, if you go to my channel on YouTube, I have a video that's like only going over what a rug pull is. For the rug pull to make sense, though, you'll have to watch the video previous about positive versus negative volume because the whole reason that rug pulls and inverse rug pulls work is because of that behavior, the expected behavior we have at negative nodes and at positive nodes. So that should help you sort of get a better grasp on that. So I can forward you those links, but otherwise they're just on my YouTube. Um, Blair, same to you actually. I would check out that rug pull video. Because I sketch it out a little bit more clearly on that video, so I think it will help you even further. Hopefully that covers you, Dubai, your question. RK, will I give you a basic overview how to use Heatseeker? Yeah, I will, RK, not super detailed, just because some of the content already exists in other videos that I can just send you. I will give you a quick breakdown though. I don't mean to like I'm not gonna like ignore your question, but yeah, first let me send my give me a second here. Let me send my YouTube real quick. And I'll have to be alternating between Zoom and Discord questions, so if I don't get to your question quickly, just I'll get to them all. It just takes me a second here. Okay, so I don't know who iPhone is, but I just sent you the link. So basically within playlists, anything under Heatseeker fundamentals is going to be where you're looking for. Um, for the videos that I was talking about, like what is a rug pull, if you're looking for just examples of different trades I've taken or setups that I thought looked quite good, just look within the trade recap section. That'll be the most useful thing there. So hopefully that helps a couple of y'all asking about that. Um, okay, basic overview of how to use Heatseeker. One second here. The academy, yeah, the academy is all John. John put a huge amount of time into that. Yeah, so RK, to quickly answer your question, Heatseeker is telling us where dealers have very strong positioning in terms of gamma. So the important thing for us is, of course, we can see where they have that positioning, and what is the way to use the maps is that we know once price taps those levels, those very strong nodes that we see, oftentimes we'll get a strong reversal, right? Because so the important thing is not where those nodes are and that we assume that it's going to go there. That's a actually a very risky way to use these maps. But it's to know that, okay, when we do tap those levels, dealers are forced to react. So what we're looking for is essentially strong volume. Um, and then we're looking for a reversal off of that, right? So if we're approaching it from above, we look for calls. If it's approaching from below, we look for puts. In terms of the indexes, we have SPX, SPY, and QQQ. So we sort of can put together an image from all three, right? Where we see, okay, maybe one is showing us that we have a potential floor that can bounce upwards off of. If you see SPY and QQQ both have a strong floor, then that tells us, oh, look, like here's a spot where we have a bit of confluence and a bit of alignment across a couple. So it's probably a good moment to play calls, right? Versus if we just had just one map on its own saying that we want to play puts, that's probably not, it's a bit of a riskier play, right? For the indexes. For individual tickers, you don't really have the ability to cross compare, right? Because most individual tickers are not that correlated, although some are. So you have to look at like sector ETFs, general market, and all of that. But at its core, using the maps is, you're looking for strong volume. Whether it's positive or negative is going to tell us how we're going to react. So at positive nodes, that means as we approach that node, price will slow down, tend to chop a bit more, become a little bit less volatile, like more dampened in a way. So we can still deflect off those nodes, right? It's just that a lot of times we'll sort of go tap the node and it'll be sort of like a slower move in and out, right? With negative nodes, these are usually signify that we're getting a very like an increase in volatility in that region. So a lot of times as we tap those nodes, we'll see a lot of very wicky price action, right? Where we'll get pretty strong, sharp projections. We may bounce a bit early, we may overshoot and bounce late. So the important thing with negative and positive is not the thesis. Like our thesis is still that we're going to bounce off of them, but the behavior of price in those zones can be completely different, right? So it can help us shift how we're actually entering the trade, right? So it's important to look mostly at what is node volume and where do we have strong nodes. But then the next thing is, okay, is it positive or negative? And know how price behaves in those kind of regimes and use that information to make sure that you're entering the play appropriately, you're exiting in a safe manner. And so you're kind of adjusting um, the way you enter a trade based on whether it's negative or positive, right? So I mean, that's the quick explanation. But again, if you want like a good intro, I guess these sessions I'm usually just going to be handling more specific questions. So if you want a general intro and like how to utilize it, I would go to Glitch's YouTube. He has an intro session 101 with, I think it's actually with the bakery. Like that's the most recent one. He also did one with Owls, like a 102, 10, 101, 102, 103, 104 session. But the bakery one is a bit more recent, so I'd actually recommend watching that one. Or you can go to my page. I have a few videos that I'm going to continue to work on, but sort of going through, okay, if someone's new to this, how would you approach learning it? And I think the last thing is if you go to announcements within Asgard or within Owls, Jewel posted a link about what is this thing called? Did he not? Oh, he might not have. Okay, I'll post a link after the session about the academy because that's a really good way to learn. So I'll go ahead and post that later today. Okay. All right then. Yeah, let me shift over to Discord real quick and I'll sort of just be swapping back and forth as I go. All right. So Taco Core or Christian, what do the nodes signify? Oh, they signify dealer positioning. Gex is gamma, which is second derivative of delta, and then Vex is showing second derivative of implied volatility. So, I mean, you don't actually need to know like technically what those mean and like how exactly this number is derived. I mean, well, firstly, that's like proprietary. Only Glitch will know that actual calculation. But secondly, what's important for us is we know where those levels are and how price behaves around them. We don't actually need to know like the full market mechanics behind it. So I mean, I can send you a few resources if you want to get into those details, but that's honestly that's something that I read a couple times and I don't really care too much about. As long as I know how to use it on a day-to-day basis, that's really what I care more about. Taco Core, do I use it in the first 30 minutes? I usually wait till after 10 a.m. Now this is a personal preference thing. Like I prefer to wait till 10 just because early morning there's a lot of reshuffling, it's pretty rapid, and it's usually just easier to trade after 10, like once a lot of that dies down. So sure, I'm gonna miss some trades that get started early morning, but I'd rather just miss those trades and have the majority of my trades be in a more, I'm not gonna say after 10 a.m. is calm, but like it's a bit calmer, right? Where the nodes are not reshuffling as crazily, and a lot of times you can see your plays develop a little bit ahead of time, right? So even 15, 20, even up to like 30 minutes in advance, I'll already know, okay, here are the strong floors I'm looking for on a given trade or strong ceilings. If we go hit those levels, now I'm going to play the reversal, right? And that's a lot easier to do when the maps are not shuffling like crazy. So for that reason, first 30 minutes I usually avoid, but also the last 10 to 20, right? So when we get to MOC period late in the day, it's the same issue, right? Where you're getting huge reshuffling on the maps, prices moving pretty erratically. So it gets a little trickier to read it if you're very new to the tool, right? So obviously, if you spend a lot of time with the tool, then it's you probably can trade those periods, but you still have to be very quick with the executions and make sure you're, pretty spot on your levels. So for people like just now learning and getting comfortable with it, I would recommend avoiding those periods, and just stick to I mean, there can still be very volatile periods throughout the day, but in general, it's not going to be as hectic. So hopefully that answers your question, Taco. Chuck Big Bucks. So, what are the most important colors to pay attention to? Purple, I know, is usually fluorescent. So, Chuck, the I would not actually encourage that you look at this just in terms of colors, right? So, heat maps are a data visualization tool, right? So, whether we're colored yellow, and the scale, in this case, the scale goes from yellow, from a deep yellow to a deep purple, right? But the strength of the node is going to tell us whether it can be a floor or a ceiling, right? So a very strong yellow node and a very strong purple node can equally be a floor or a ceiling. What's important to know is that there's a difference in behavior at those nodes, right? But in terms of like where I'm setting my floors and ceilings, I actually don't care whether it's yellow or purple. And I don't care if it's green or blue, right? For me, it's a volume, like a number thing. So I would recommend you actually look at the numbers, right? Because a lot of times you'll have a very strong yellow node. Um, and a very strong purple node, but actually you'll have other nodes that are not strong color wise that are have the same strength, right? So for example, if you look at QQQ on my screen right now, right? The yellow node is 55,000. The purple node is here at 41,000, right? Negative 41,000. This 567 node is at 39,000, but it's positive, so it's not showing very strong. But this is something that carries almost equal weight to this negative node, right? So this is a good example of like the just by based on what the max positive and what max negative nodes, sometimes you're going to have significant nodes that absolutely will matter that are going to show up as green or blue or like maybe not as strong of a yellow or purple, right? So if you look at this just in terms of color, you're probably going to miss a few good plays, right? So I always tell people your first assumption can be based on the colors, but I would double check all the numbers, check what they actually are, and that's always going to give you the most complete picture, right? Because the visualization sometimes can mislead you or be a little bit off. Well, it's not off, like it's going to show you what it's programmed to do. But looking at the actual numbers themselves will never mislead you. It's just the numbers, the data is the data, right? So a lot of times I tell people it's always double check the numbers are aligning with whatever thesis you're pulling based on the colors, because the sometimes people will miss something if you're only looking at strong yellow, strong purple, right? So hopefully that answers, that covers that, Chuck. But yeah, like I said, yellow or purple, or even green and sometimes blue, right? They can all be floors and ceilings. It's just what is a strong node, and then whether it's positive or negative. So whether we see yellow, green versus purple, blue, that's just telling us how price is going to move in those zones, which is what I covered like 5 minutes ago. Okay. So Taco Core, I mean, rug pull. Yeah, I can cover both right now. So I mean, rug pull right here, 639, 640. That's a rug pull. Inverse rug pull is 563, 562, right? So rug pull is positive above negative, a reverse rug pull is positive below negative. And the whole logic here is you want price to approach them from the negative node, right? That's usually when these are easiest to play. So if price is pushing up towards 639 from below, then we have a rug pull where it's going to tap 639 to 640, that zone. And usually I recommend playing it towards the high end of that zone. So you'd be waiting for 639.5 or even 640. Then you play that rejection back down. And then the reverse rug pull, again, you want to approach from the negative side. So you want price to come down at that 563 node, tap into 562 or at least get close, and then play that bounce off of it upwards, right? So the taco, that should be covering yours. Chuck, but green is gamma and accelerates in either direction. That's the same price. Chuck, I'm not understanding the second question about green is gamma. Um, does the amount for each node have major significance? Yeah, so Chuck, the value of each node, do you still need to cover that last one or no? But I guess the big thing I'll say, Chuck, is that the volume matters more than the color, right? Than the positive versus negative. So the actual strength of the node is what I look at first. Then I assess the positive versus negative. So I know how I'm expecting price to move in that area. And so I can enter the trade accordingly. Um, okay. But yeah, hopefully that's making sense. Awesome. Edward, what caused the SPX explosion late day? I'm not sure. Let's take a look. I was not. I mean, late day, what was it, around 3? Let me pull up my charts. Hold up. Where are we today? Oh, I remember now. So there was a floor, definitely like 658. What did I just do? All right, there we go. There was a floor at 658. I think I was on a call. Actually, I was on a one-on-one with someone while this was happening. And then, so I think what happened here is we had a 658 floor. I don't remember if QQQ had as good of an argument. I think SPX also had a 6600 and 6605 node like all day. So let me flip this. Yeah. So if you see here, right, the 600, 6600, 6605, these nodes were based into a pretty strong floor where we had pumped above it at around like 2. We had this strong push upwards. But after we pushed above the 6600, 6605 zone, we never really broke back below, right? So this double stack positive on SPX held the rest of the day, as well as the 658 on SPY, right? So this is a good example of like a strong confluence between the two, right? Where if you're looking at 6605 or 6600, both of those levels are right next to SPY at 6658. So that's the kind of confluence you want to be looking for, where you have floors aligned, right? And even earlier in the day, those had been ceilings, those levels, and we had rejected off of it like a good 3 times, right? So once we finally broke above, that previous resistance can now flip to support. And that would have been our big clue for taking any kind of upside play, right? QQQ, I would say that like the 587, the floor was a little bit lower. So this is a good example of like not all floors will be aligned, right? So here, QQQ, the floor is a little bit lower than SPY and SPX. So a lot of times what will happen is since SPY and SPX are both in confluence and a little bit higher, I'll still be willing to take a trade. Well, to be clear, I didn't actually take any trades on any of these, but when you see two of the floors are higher than the other one, you can a lot of times trust that that higher floor can hold, right? Whereas if we had the opposite, where both floors were lower and QQQ had its own solo node a little bit higher as a floor, there I'd probably be waiting for the one the floor, the lower floor, because that has confluence across two of the maps, right? So generally, it's advisable to make sure whatever floors or ceilings you're playing are um, present on 2 of the 3 maps, or even all 3. But there's always going to be a bit of misalignment, so there's a bit of judgment that comes in too, right? But in this case, the SPX and SPY maps were definitely in line with each other, and showing that we had a very strong floor at that point. So who asked this? Edward. Oh, Edward, this is for Thursday. Oh, shoot. Sorry, I thought you were talking about today. Yeah, I mean, let me go look at Thursday then. Uh, so Thursday we actually had a similar thing as what we had on SPX today, where SPX today had a double positive node, very strong, holding as a floor. Thursday we actually had that present on SPY and QQQ, right, where we had these very strong double positive nodes holding. As well as SPX, we have the 6565 as a floor, right, like the king node at the time. So probably what happened was a deflection off of those, but uh, yeah, I don't know when, I don't know what time specifically you're talking about, but yeah, around 3 we got a strong pop. We later revisited those same levels, even dipped closer to 6565. So we actually like bounced almost perfectly off this node, right? And then we got the strong rip into like very late day. So Edward, like even so hopefully that covers your question, Edward. But the main point here is like you're still looking for deflections even pretty late in the day, right? So you're still saying, okay, what floors, what ceilings do we have? Just recognize that end of day, these maps tend to get a lot more compressed, right? Like the total visible range reduces. So it's just something to keep into account where, whereas early day, you usually want to see like $1, $2 of space to move. Late day, it may show up as just $1, but a $1 move late day is going to pay pretty big, right? 348. I mean, 348 same thesis, right? The thesis, let me pull SPX back up. So the thesis that gave this bounce here around 3 p.m., right? It gave like a 10-point move, well, a little bit less, like 8 points. Is the same thesis that gave this bounce much later on around 3:30 or even 3:45, right? Which would have been that rip that you're talking about. And then one thing you'll notice is once because I mean, we're still looking for the deflection, right? Once this move gets going, what you'll see is that a lot of this volume just starts rolling higher and higher. But if you're entering at 348, that's a mock period at 350. So like the reshuffling is very, very rapid, which is what I was getting to earlier of um this can be pretty tricky to play if you're not very comfortable with it. So yeah, I always tell people be pretty cautious around mock. It's just a pretty tricky time to be trading. Okay, so S penny, you notice that the heat maps have percentage on the left. Is that misleading? No. So the percentage is just a different feature. So that's the velocity mode. It won't show in the replay, but it'll show live. But you can still open it in the replay actually. So if I come in here and click on a node, it'll show me the velocity. This is something that's not visible on the Discord maps, right? So for anyone in OWLS only, this is not something you can look at. But all this is telling us is this node. So for example, 6585 in this in the one that I selected here, compared to 1 minute ago, how much has it grown? Compared to 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and even 1 hour, 4 hours in one day, right? So it's showing us that node, its current value. If you compare back to whatever interval you're looking at, whatever, time you're curious about, how much percent growth has it had? And also it will also show you just the raw growth, right? So this can be very useful for example, if you're already in a trade, right? Like let's say you take a bounce off of a node, right? An upwards bounce, and you see a lot of nodes above spot price start to increase a lot in volume, right? Where you're seeing 50% increases in volume, and then the downside shrinking off really hard. That can be a good clue of like, okay, like, I'm still going to take my trim at, I don't know, 50% just to make up a number. But on these runners, I'm going to hold them a little extra, a little longer than I thought because I'm seeing all this volume growth above, right? That doesn't mean we're going to go tap those nodes, but it means that the upside is strengthening, right? So a lot of times you can adjust how you trim or like how far you carry your runners based on that. Another thing you can look for on the volume growth. Oh, well, now, other thing I'll say there is just because a node above is growing 10%, I wouldn't actually care. Like make sure you're looking for significant growth in volume because these nodes will sort of grow and shrink a little bit just as the day goes on naturally, right? And also as price moves up, in general, nodes above price increase, but that's a very small increase. Usually they're just pulling in like an extra 20%, 10%, right? So I'm looking for like big jumps in volume where I'm saying, okay, 40% growth, 50% growth, or even like up to 100%, right? Like I'm looking for very big pops in volume, not just like, okay, did this node grow 10%, right? To me, that's not significant enough to actually pay much attention to it. So that's one way you can use it is just like when you're in trades, whether it's for your favor or against your favor. So if price starts to bounce upwards off of a floor, and I see nodes on the downside are not actually weakening very much, or they're actually getting stronger, I'll actually trim earlier, right? So it'll shift how I manage my trade while I'm in it, based on if I see volume moving higher or if it's staying low. And a lot of times that percentage is helping me to guide me on that, right? But I'll be clear, like my thesis is never just based off of a percentage growth, right? So just because I see a large node grow doesn't mean I just take calls or puts or whatever, right? I'm still the bulk of my analysis is based on where we have strong levels, where we have floors, ceilings, what is it a positive or negative floor or ceiling, and that's like where my main bias comes from. And then the velocity is really like sort of like an extra confluence, but it comes in much later, right? The other way to use it is you can see a divergence, right? So as price drops towards a node or as it goes up towards a node, we expect those nodes to actually grow a little bit, like the 10 to 20% I was mentioning earlier. So there will be times where you see price dropping, but you see nodes above price start to grow. So that's a pretty big clue of like, okay, even though price is dropping, we're actually getting more positioning on the upside. So at that point, I already start immediately looking for, okay, is there some kind of floor I'm missing? Is there something I maybe some level bounce spot I may be missing that I can potentially use to take an upside play because I'm seeing that positioning start to grow on the upside, right? And then the last thing I'll say about velocity is you can use it to catch anytime they're moving the ceiling or the floor in our favor or against us, right? So a lot of times what will happen is, let's say we want to take a downside play, but if the floors are rolling higher, right? So if volume is consistently going up and up and up, even if it's under current price, that can be bullish, right? So even if volume is increasing below price, if it's shifting higher and closer to the spot price we're at, what that means is if we do get that rejection downside, the floor is now higher, is closer to our current price. So the downside move, instead of having, I don't know, $3 of space to go down, that could be cut down to $1. So it's actually a bullish sign, right? Even though volume is technically shifting below price. Hopefully that makes sense. What's this? S Penny. But I will say, like for someone who's new, if you notice the velocity is throwing you off, I actually just turn it off, right? Just trade without it, and then you can always implement it later. Like if it's too much to keep track of. All right. Um, okay, let me swap over to Zoom real quick. JC, I'll get your question right after I do some of these Zoom ones. Okay, respect the Academy. Michael L. Personal Q&A. What trades did I take today and how did I do? Oh, I didn't take any trades today. I woke up late, so and then I was in meetings in the afternoon, so I didn't. I usually trade between usually 10 to like 11:30 is when I'm trying to take a trade. But I guess while I was on some of these meetings in the afternoon, some of the trades I saw that were pretty solid were one, this SPX low day sweep, so around like one. So actually, yeah, I can just go over those. So let me see here. Actually, was it this one? Maybe it was the put play actually. It might have been 130. Sorry, I'm trying to remember when this was. Or it was two. Because there was one I was chatting with someone that he called it out like almost spot on. I just don't remember what time it was at. Sorry about this. Okay, so this 231 is decent, right? So like I guess a little bit earlier, so 220-ish. Yeah, so as we got price pushing up after this, this 2 p.m. candle, we got like a huge move upward on SPX. One thing we saw, so let me go back a little bit more actually. So this move started, right? And we saw, okay, we have obviously SPX were kind of in a range, but we saw a SPY and QQQ. We were sort of pushing up towards these stack of double positive nodes, right? So as we start pushing into these nodes, what you'll see is the SPY node, obviously we maintain all this volume, but we're hitting the upper extreme of the SPX range, right? So the range from 45 to 65 is now approaching that top end. Am I on the wrong day? Holy crap, I'm on the wrong day. Wait, sorry, y'all. This is why this was making no sense. Okay, okay, yeah, yeah. So it was the 6605 node. That's what I was looking for. All right. So we did have this stack here on SPX and SPY as well. SPY, we had the 658 node. I know it's a reverse rug pull, but again, since we're approaching from the opposite side, if this positive node still holds as a ceiling, we won't actually get that like full shoot up, right? QQQ was not like giving full support, right? Like QQQ, the ceiling was definitely a little bit higher on this double stack positive up here at 590. But we had a bit of room to the downside, right? Whereas, okay, QQQ, we're pushing up towards like 588.5. If you reject there, 587 is still giving us about a dollar and a half of room to the downside, right? So at that point, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, yeah, there's a chance here if we have 658, 6605, if these nodes hold, we can get a downside move, right? So obviously, within two candles, we had dropped like a good $8 on SPX. But if you're waiting for that like the top end to hit on SPX, if you're waiting for 658 to tap pretty well or actually overshoot a little bit over, then you're still able to catch small scalp there, right? And then I think, okay, so now the 2 p.m. play might make more sense because I'm looking at the actual right day. Okay, yeah. So then on this push upwards, right, what we had is price was falling. So let me rewind a little bit back. So we look over here towards 140. Price had just rejected 658 earlier, around 130. So now we're getting this put play, right? So if you caught the put play, obviously this rejection again would have been 6605 and 658. Like those nodes were very strong all day and sort of served as good put plays and call plays. You're also getting this rejection of 587 on QQQ, bit of an overshoot and rejection there. But then as price starts to drop, what we immediately start looking for is like, oh, okay, like, I missed the put play. Like, say price starts moving, you say, okay, I missed that, obviously. But what we start looking for is what floors are starting to form that could potentially bounce price back up, right? So on SPY, you're looking at 654, which is obviously a lot further down. And also you see these nodes at 55 and 65 on SPX. So these floors roughly align, but they're much, much lower than in price, right? So that's like more of a stretch target. So what I always look for is like, okay, sure, the 654 and the 6555, all of those show a very low floor, but we have QQQ showing us a much higher floor, right? From 587 to 585, we have a huge stack of volume here, right? So this could be somewhere that we reject price if this big stack holds, right? But then what I was looking for at this point is like, okay, can we find any kind of confluence on SPX or SPY of another floor that's going to match with this, right? And what we notice is SPY kind of has an air pocket, or it has an air pocket down to 654, so no confluence there. But we notice that SPX has this 6585 node, right? Which as we start dropping, we pick up a bit of volume on these couple nodes here, right? So then this is technically a gatekeeper, right? So if you read some of the docs, we have this stretch or like this very large node downside that's sort of like our ultimate target, let's say. But a gatekeeper is a node, like any significant volume in the way that can deflect price before we actually make it to these large nodes, right? So then due to the 6585 gatekeeper, as well as PQQ having a huge amount of volume down here, 585, 586, and even 584, um, a strong floor was formed there, right? And that's sort of where we got that 2 p.m. bounce upwards. So that yeah, I think that one would have been a good play. And then any play of the 6605 and SPY at 658 level, right? Like there's a couple call opportunities in the afternoon, and then there's a couple put out opportunities, sort of like late morning. So who asked this question? So I think that was Michael L's question. Oh, Blair, thanks for sending that. Appreciate it. Freddy's iPhone. Does negative versus positive mean much, or is it just dependent on price? I think you were saying is the absolute value is what is important. Yeah, so Freddie, they both matter, but yes, the absolute value is what I look at first. Like for me, the absolute value is what tells us whether a node can be a floor or a ceiling. Positive versus negative absolutely still matters because it tells us how price will react at those levels, right? So we know that a positive is going to give a more dampened reaction when price is there, and then negative nodes a lot of times will be a lot more volatile, more explosive. So you have to keep track of both. But what I always tell people is like I look for where is the strong volume, absolute value, and then I go ahead and see, okay, is it positive, is it negative, and then that's where that's helping to guide me in how I enter the trade and how I expect price to move in those areas. So I would not ignore the sign, like it absolutely does matter, but I think some people only look at the sign and don't actually look at absolute volume. So you actually need to look at both. Jag, what about the new tools? Like Flow Seeker and the charting integration? Flow Seeker should be pretty close to release. Like I've been I've been using it in beta and like spamming updates to the developer. So yeah, he's probably pretty tired of me, so that's gonna come out soon. The charting integration I think might need a couple more weeks, a week or two more. But that's also pretty close. Nexus I actually don't know. I'd have to look into that. Um, yeah, Jag, I don't know if that was your question, if you want me to like go into what each of those are, but I can do so if you'd like. Uh, can I show some? I can show. Oh, let me think here. I mean, I'll quickly show flow. I don't actually know if. All right, hopefully glitch doesn't get onto me about this. But wait 1 second. I need to move this little toolbar from Zoom. It's like in the middle of my face. I mean, the flow tool is just supposed to be pretty similar to unusual whales, which I never used. So actually, I have no idea if this is comparable. I mean, from what I know, it's very comparable. But I mean, it's just flow. Like we have a live feed, and then there's a flow scanner, I believe, and I think there's also some way to rig up alerts. Again, I'm not too experienced with this, but I think if you pull over here, there's a bunch of different filters you can use. And that's my interpretation of it. Like I'll be honest, I've tested this and like I know how to break it, right? And like give feedback on the website itself and the UI. I don't actually know how Flow works, so I'm probably I'm probably not the best person to ask about that. Um, but yeah, that's this tool. I do think hopefully long term they add some kind of like AI bot with it. Because for those of us that can't read Flow, obviously I can't. Y'all can hear this clearly by how I'm talking about this, but it would be nice if there's some kind of like AI filter where you just say like, oh, like I'm interested on, I don't know, Datadog, right? Like, I think Datadog has a bullish structure based on the heat map. Is there any flow that will help my thesis, right? Or not help, but like aligns with my thesis, right? So you can use it as a bit of a confluence there. But I'll be honest, I'm not like a flow expert. So probably Keon for everyone in Owls. Keon, I would imagine he's been testing it as well. He's probably gonna have a much more detailed breakdown, and like he can probably give you a lot more info on like how to actually use this versus what I can. So the charting integration, I think Glitch has a few like let me see if I can find Glitch. Yeah, I think he's posted a few like snapshots on Twitter. Um how do you do this? Maybe on media? Yeah, so basically it's showing all the heat maps, right? It's overlaid onto the charts, right? So now it's not obviously it's not overlaying every single node. Like that would be not a disaster, but it'd be a mess, right? If it's trying to overlay every single node that we're able to see. But it's probably going to be overlaying like the top X percentage of nodes, right? So then it's showing us, okay, is it positive versus negative? And then basically on the glow where like the how large the circle is telling you how strong that node is, right? So I don't remember I don't know what day this was, but you can see as price dropped towards this level here at 350. What is this? Tesla? Yeah, Tesla. You're seeing this node is having a huge amount of growth, right? And then even once we overshoot it, we then get this other smaller floor to show up after. So I don't know if Glitch took a play on this or what, but like, you have a pretty bullish double bottom down here that you could probably play, or maybe even if you played this level, this higher level, I think you swung it over the weekend into today. I think Tesla was a play that did pretty well. He banked on, yeah. So I mean, yeah, I think Tesla was the one he caught. So yeah, Jack, that should be that tool. Nexus, I don't actually have like enough screenshots to show, but Nexus is essentially it's just a way to track your trades, right? So I think I don't you're able to integrate your broker and then your brokerage, and then you might be able to also input stuff manually in case you don't have like a brokerage that aligns. But basically, it's any trade you're taking, you're just doing on your brokerage as usual, but Nexus is able to keep track of it and tell you like a few pretty useful stats and all of that. So it's good for like just journaling purposes, of course, right? Like you can look back through all your trades and it's like not much effort on your part, right? If it's just integrated through your brokerage, you don't actually have to like be journaling all the time. So like, of course, you should probably go back in and probably add some comments of like your thesis and like your confidence level, etc. But the actual executions and all of that, and like what was your max drawdown before profits, and like a lot of that, I think will be tracked in there. And then I think there's also like a community aspect to it, so like leaderboards and all of that. That would be cool to see. I don't actually. That's not really like an improvement of the. Like I don't think that's going to give any improvement in performance for people, but I guess that's fun to have, right? And I don't know, maybe he'll do like competitions or some stuff like that. Who knows? Okay, Juan. Oh shoot, Juan. I don't know which example you're talking about. This question was a while ago. Yeah, I'm not sure, Juan. Juan, if you're still in here, just let me know. Oh, March 30 around 11 a.m. Okay, yeah, that helps. Give me a second. March 30, 11 a.m. March 30, 11 a.m. In that SPY rug, would it work since QQ has an inverse rug? I mean, SPY, I wouldn't even call SPY a rug here, right? Because the 639 node isn't negative. So we do have like a couple negative nodes here at 637. So like it kind of is this like maybe like a detached rug in a way. But yeah, that's a good point, right? Of like when you have rug pulls and you have inverse rug pulls opposing each other, a lot of times we'll either sort of just range within there or just chop. So the only trades at those points is if we really go and hit the extreme end, right? So either ceiling or floor. So in this case, I wouldn't be doing anything at all with where price is right now at 11 for March 30. I'd be waiting for, okay, can we go tap 640 or can we go down maybe tap 635 or 562 and then play like upwards move off of that. Um, yeah, if it was a bit after. Oh, I see. Like this rug pull came in here. Yeah, but well, actually, even in this replay, right, you're seeing, okay, we went back down. We finally tapped the low end of 562 and 635. So this bounce here, I'm still comfortable playing that because again, the rug pulls, I don't actually look at them for rejections until we tap the positive node or until we get very close. So I'd be saying, okay, yes, we do have a bit of resistance here, so maybe I'd trim a little early, but you could definitely have like a good chunk of the position right until this rug pull actually gets hit, right? Although I don't actually know where we rejected or not. But yeah, the I think in this example, oh, I remember that was the one I had been showing earlier. Yeah, in this example, we never actually hit the entry for the rug pull on this, right? If we would have gone a bit like a full dollar higher, then I'd be comfortable entering that as a rug pull, or maybe like a dollar and a half even. And by that point, you actually would have enough room to the downside on QQQ before you hit the reverse rug pull. Okay, hopefully, Juan, that answers your question. Like, I think in this case, there was enough room between them that you could actually play that rug pull or the reverse rug pull and just play back and forth. But if there's ever a case where they're a lot closer, then I would just skip the trade, right? If we're anticipating a lot of chop due to that, because you have conflicting opinions on two of them, I would just skip out at that moment. Oh, GW, I have no idea when you were. GW, I have no idea when you're when we are looking at there, but hopefully it will. Seems like it was a rug pull based on someone thumbing up your thing. Oh, 2:30 today. Okay. Yeah, sorry. I should probably maybe I should check these comments more frequently because I'm getting questions in the moment. Is Spire rug pull here? No. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, technically it is positive over negative. Okay, I guess that's another good point to make. So for rug pulls, I'm looking for like major nodes, right? 657 in this instance, 7,000 compared to 250,000. I'm looking at that and I'm saying this is not enough volume for it to matter, right? So I wouldn't be playing that as a rug pull at all. Um, so the general rule of thumb of like what is strong enough volume to matter for me is something that's 20 to 25% of the king node. So if I'm looking at a king node of 250,000, I'm looking for something that's at least like 50, 60, 70,000 and saying, okay, this is actually significant, right? So if I'm looking at a node of 7,000, I'm just ignoring it basically. Hopefully that clears that up, GW. All right. What about Stewie, Blair? Oh, I think that's some kind of like AI thing. I'm not actually sure about that one. I know it's been under development for a while. I'm not sure of like what the plan is for release, and yeah, I'm not too. I can't really give an answer on that one. At least right now. Christian, what time frame do I prefer on Trinity? I use 10 or 15 minutes. I would not go to the 1 minute. I would either use 5, 10, or 15. Just because same reason we don't chart on the 1 minute. Like a lot of times the candles can be a little bit erratic. And same thing with the nodes. Sometimes you'll get some pretty big jumps or drops in volume that over a 5 minute time span are just like, a small 5% increase. But if you're looking at the 1 minute, you'll be looking at like, oh, it grew 100%. Now it just dropped 90%. And you may just lead you to overreact or fixate on something that's not actually a sustained change in volume, right? Whereas usually if you're looking at a 15-minute velocity time frame, you're seeing that nodes grew 50% over 15 minutes. Usually that's a more sustained thing where okay, we're truly getting a growth in positioning here. Hopefully that helps, Christian. All right, sweet. Okay, back to Discord. What's going on here? So Jed, could you walk me through a trade April 1st? Yeah, we can look at April 1st. Let me see here. So you're saying look at April 1st, 124. Okay, so April 1st, 124. Let me pull up the chart too. I don't want to just ignore this. All right. So I think April 1st, yeah, April 1st was the day that we had a double top, then dropped off hard. I think news was helping that drop a little bit. Yeah, so I think the news dropped like around 155. I think it was this candle here, right? This double top was super annoying because it swept a little bit further than I think a lot of people expected. So I think a lot of people got a bit nervous about it. But to answer your question, Jed, the ceiling is bouncing between two values in SPX, SPY show reverse rug. Yeah. So yeah, a few things here, Jed. Like one, you're absolutely correct, right? Like we have our ceilings here on SPY. One big thing I'll highlight though is that um, I think if we go back a little bit, actually, yeah, it was more clear around 110, but this 6610 node was actually quite a strong node, right? Like I know 6630, 6620, like this pocket up here was the strongest, but we had 6610 at about half the volume of the king node. So this is my whole point of like the sometimes significant nodes don't actually show up super bright yellow or bright purple, right? So you need to also check some of these lesser colors sometimes and just check what the actual volume is because that can clue you in. Because what we had here is QQQ was basically at this ceiling of 588. So QQQ had a very clear rug pull, right? 588, 587. SPX was hitting this intermediate node though, right? 6610 is hitting this gatekeeper. So based off QQQ alone, this looks very simple. But then SPX, this was more, you're saying, okay, 6610 combined with QQQ, this is sort of like our risky entry, right? And the safer entry would have been waiting for SPX to tap this stack up here and then SPY to tap into this rug pull here at 560 or 659 and 660. So again, either you can make the argument for either one. It's probably just people who are a bit more aggressive would probably try this QQQ one, and then people who are more on the conservative side, they probably would have been waiting for these higher ceilings to tap, right? Um, so that's in terms of the entry. Now, in terms of what you said about the 657, yes, you are correct, right? Like we had pretty limited downside at the time. So definitely you could catch a small scalp and probably, at least with this current map, you'd be saying, oh, okay, we're probably only gonna go down, hit 657. So like I'm getting like, I don't know, maybe $1 of movement, right? So still enough to do if you're patient enough on the entry, you still make money there. And that was sort of the move that happened here, even before news dropped. Obviously, after news dropped, we just sort of like fell off. But what I wanted to highlight is a lot of times with these levels that do get broken, what you'll see is that the volume starts to tail off on them and roll lower and lower, right? So sometimes it's more clear than others. I don't actually remember how it was on Monday, or not Monday. What is this, Wednesday? Yeah, Wednesday. But yeah, let's just take a look. So as price starts to then reject and drop, so one thing we'll see is that QQQ, this rug pull strengthened quite a bit. So that thesis was getting quite nice. And even SPX 6605 flipped negative and then was also giving us that rug pull. Actually, yeah, it flipped negative actually. It had been positive previous. So right, that flipped negative, we formed a rug pull, right, which set up here. So what that's telling us is that at least based on SPX and QQQ is that these negative regions, these negative gamma regions are growing. So we're expecting like a more volatile drop, right? Obviously SPY was positive though, so it's like again, this is a case where you're sometimes going to have conflicting signs. So a lot of times you just go with the majority, right? So you say, okay, SPX QQQ pointing that side, so then we're expecting a bit more volatile. But what you'll start to see is that we see a lot of growth. A couple nodes to note are actually SPX 6530 and 6520. Like these nodes had huge volume growth. We're also going to see a lot of growth on this 582, 583 on QQQ. And then also, I think SPY rolls down to 654, maybe was the node that was like the biggest clue. But then as price started dropping into that 657 node, let me skip through here. So like even right here, what we're going to see is a lot of this volume starts flipping down to 656, right? And we see this huge growth down here on these SPX nodes. And again, SPY or QQQ 580, 583, 584, like all these nodes are having huge pumps in volume, right? So like if we open up 654, we see that it's grown, you know, 35% last 15 minutes, right? Like a huge push in volume there. And probably if we look at those QQQ nodes, it'd be an even larger push. Yeah, 40% on 653. What other node do I need to look at? This velocity takes a while to load, so I'm not gonna. But yeah, 15 minutes, same thing. 583, we're seeing, it's increasing by 50%. So we're getting huge growth below. So a lot of times, Absolutely though, like the reverse rug pull is there, so I would be trimming contracts as we hit that, right? Or even a little bit ahead of time, right? This 580 grew by 100%. So you would definitely be trimming contracts here because this is somewhere where potentially price can bounce back up, right? But if you're holding any kind of runners, once you see these nodes flaring up lower, that is a sign that's like, okay, a lot of volume stepping in. Maybe this is something I can try to hold a little bit longer, right? And by then we had already had, I think maybe the first couple news candles, like one or two. And as we keep flicking through, what we'll see is the 6530 actually flipped to be a king node. Um, it's actually, I'll make a comment about that in a second, but we got a lot of this volume just keep rolling off, right? So we're in a huge negative zone here on SPX. A lot of this volume on SPY and QQQ is rolling lower. SPX are even our king node has flipped downside. So that was a big sign of like, okay, if you already caught this deflection, you're in any kind of puts, you probably hold your runners a little bit longer, right? So hopefully that helps, Jed. The big comment I'll make here is this also shows us why it's very dangerous to chase nodes, right? When that 6530 and 6520 pulled up, um, we obviously did drop quite far, right? Like from the high of day, we dropped like 40 points. But if you start chasing these nodes and assuming, okay, maybe we're just gonna, I don't know, break under a level like previous, I don't know, say this level here, right? We're gonna break under, retest, and then get a full drop all the way down until we tap this level. Or if you're holding puts all the way until we hit 6530, you'd have gotten burned terribly, right? Because what you're not acknowledging at that point is what are the other nodes that can bounce price before we go hit 6530, right? So we kept dropping. How far was this? Yeah, we kept dropping further, right? Like we had a couple other very strong red candles after this quick consolidation period here. But at this point, what we're seeing is QQQ and SPY have very strong floors, right? We have 583, 584, and 553, 550, sorry, 653, 654. So again, don't get caught chasing like a full move. A lot of times we need to be considering what nodes can potentially bounce price beforehand, right? So for the same reason, 6610 was a good rejection spot, even though it wasn't the king node. What we had is spying QQQ with these gatekeepers that prevented these king nodes from happening at 580 and 6530, right? Um, so yeah, again, this is something where it's like if you're just watching color, you're gonna miss some of this stuff, right? Like you're not gonna catch some of these plays. But if you're looking at this more sort of like whole picture, then you'll be able to see some of the things emerge. Yeah. So Jed, but again, to answer your question, like the clear move based at the entry point would have been just from like SPX high of day down to around wherever what was it 657 was or 600, right? Like that's where we had a pretty strong reverse rug pull. So either if you take that play and took a full exit at the reverse rug pull, I can't really fault you. Like that's probably the smart thing to do based on that reverse rug pull being present. But if it's ever a case where you have multiple contracts, it's probably worth just leaving a runner. Like a lot of times I'll leave a runner just to see what happens, right? Um, even if I don't expect it to keep going too much further, right? Like I'll just put break even stop loss and just let it keep running. But obviously, if you're that's only something you can do if you're able to grab multiple contracts, right? So if you can't do that, then just trim where it's safest and then just sell your full position there. All right, awesome, Jed. Mule. How do I differentiate between these two statements as the day goes on? The node is acting as support, and a tested node will eventually deliver. Uh, Yeah, Emil. So I mean, as the day goes on, I guess to answer your question is like we treat it as a support until it's tested too many times, and then at that point, I either just stop playing it, like I'll just stop playing that level, or I'll just size very, very lightly, right? So I guess today's a pretty good example, right? Of like we actually held, especially on QQQ, right? QQQ held 586 all day, right? But if you count the taps here, we bounced once, twice, three, I guess four if you count this as an overshoot. But even if you don't count this, we bounced four times today, right? Off this level. So by the time we hit this a third time and bounce this third time, I probably wouldn't have been playing this at all, or I would have sized it a lot lighter, right? Because at that point, you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, the probabilities are less favorable for a bounce, right? For the first bottom and the double bottom, they're a lot more favorable. By the time you hit the triple bottom, I think the percentage goes from like 60 down to 30%, right? Of a holding. So Sure, sometimes it is going to bounce, sometimes it's going to break through, right? But as soon as we have more of that uncertainty, it's better for us to say, okay, I'll just skip this trade. I'll wait for another chance where I have a first level tap or a double bottom, right? And a lot of times those will be a lot safer. So also on the upside, right, we had like this, I think it was a 6605, right, on SPX. So we had like one, two, three, maybe even four. We had four rejections to the downside off that level. So again, this would be a case where, yeah, sure, maybe the first two I would look at it a lot more confidently. By the time it starts hitting the third and fourth time, I'm way more suspicious. So either I'll deploy a lot less capital or I'll just skip the trade entirely of us holding that level, right? So that's how I treat that mule. Like I know some days we are gonna get four or five bounces off the same level, but I know long term, statistics favor playing anything second bouncer before, first or second bounces, right? Anything third bouncer after it could play out. Like there's always a chance, of course, but it's a lot less likely. So a lot of times I'll just end up skipping those trades. Chuck, if it double, what was it that I said? If it double bottoms, it's likely to bounce, but triple bottom. Oh yeah, Chuck. So I don't know where Glitch got these from. I think he said it was like from a long, long time ago. But his like rough percentages for how likely we are to bounce on a tap of a level is first tap, I think was like towards 80%. Second tap, you're looking at like 60, 66%, two-thirds. And then by the time you hit it for a third test, that's dropped all the way down to like 30, like to a third, right? So 33%. So a lot of times you'll just avoid that third tap, right? Or take it much, much lighter size. But the main point there, right, is like the more a level gets tested, the more potential it has for breaking through. So for me, I know, okay, anything like if you're playing something that you're expecting to hold 33% of the time, there's no edge at all, right? Like in theory, we need something that's going to hold at least half for there to be an edge. But even then, you'd prefer if your edge is a little bit higher than just 52%, right? Yeah. So Chuck Mule, hopefully that helps out there. Let me see here. Christian, did I already answer this question about the time frame on Trinity? I think I did. I believe I did. All right. Anything else? We still have a bit of time actually. It's only 10:10. What's up to y'all? I mean, I can continue as long as y'all need, and then if not, I'll probably just I'll go record some YouTube videos. So either way, it's gonna be either way, y'all have something to go through. And then for anyone who's asking for just general resources, if you aren't able to find them in the Owls pinned messages, just DM me and I'll make sure I get you a few of the things that I mentioned very early on in the call that should help y'all out. Uh, Blair, what do you, what, what do I think about Spy? Let me check. Give me a second here. All right, what do I think about Spy? And they switched it's really annoying. They switched the sh keyboard shortcuts. Piss me off. All right, so Spy for tomorrow. Looks like we have some upside. SPX, let's see. Oh, SPX as well, actually, has a lot of upside. QQQ is a pretty mixed bag, though. Why is this so slow? Yeah, this is really slow to switch. Why is that the case? I don't know. All right. Oh, I forgot we can look at this on Trinity now for Vex. All right, so if we're looking at Vex on Trinity, yeah, it definitely looks like more upside actually. I mean, we'd have to check how futures overnight is going. All right, so futures overnight is not showing upside. So, um, Was there news coming out? Like we already swept yesterday's lows. It's actually a pretty big drop. Interesting. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, the maps had been showing a bit of upside. In terms of downside, it looks like maybe 654, 6550. We have some levels that can catch as a support, but yeah, it looks like we're selling off. I mean, I don't know. I've been pretty ignoring of any kind of swings on indexes just due to news cycles. So yeah, Blair, I'll probably just wait till market open and then form my thesis there. Um, sorry. I don't know why you're saying sorry, Blair. No worries. Oh, hey, Lerald. So discussion about runners, a good plan is to scale out half at half, half at 50%, stop loss break even. Yeah, Lerald, yeah, I love that plan. So like sometimes people will adjust how much of their trade they'll trim based on the strength of the move, etc. But actually, when you're starting out, it's a lot easier to have a set plan because when you have a set plan, it just removes that variable, right? It's just one thing less to think about, and so you can focus on just what is the actual setup you're taking, right? Long term, though, what a lot of people do is they'll start skewing. Where's their first trim? Do they trim more or less of their position based on their confidence in the play? But yeah, I wouldn't do that until later down. So yeah, Larold, I like yours. I mean, at a minimum, the rule is always when you're at 100%, you should have. I mean, the minimum is 50%, but honestly, I would have even towards three-quarters of your trade should be exited. Okay, Juan, would you recommend working more on individual tickers first since they're less volatile? Um, there's two ways to look at this one. Yes, individual tickers a lot of times will have simpler maps, but with individual tickers, you can sometimes get very caught off by an overall index day. So if you're charting everything out, mapping everything out for individuals, and you find an extremely bullish play, like it's a very strong setup, but it's bullish, right? If the markets open up, I don't know, Trump says something, something happens, or even if Trump says nothing, just the markets just have a red day. If the market, like if SPY drops $11 on the day, there's very few bullish setups you could have found that would have worked out anyways, right? So the big risk with doing so is that yes, a lot of times with individual tickers, you have simpler maps that you're looking at, but a lot of times what happens is those simpler maps can not play out because the overall market is going to go against that thesis, right? So what you can do is if you're looking for individual tickers is make sure you have a couple options for bullish and bearish scenarios and make sure that you're trying to match the overall direction of the market, right? And that's why a lot of people actually prefer indexes because yes, it's a bit more complex, but if you're able to, learn to read the maps, interpret each index individually, and then put together a whole rounded thesis, you're going to be a bit more protected because you're playing the overall market, right? Like there's obviously news can go against you, but that's really the only thing, right? That can throw you off big time. Whereas with individual tickers, there's a lot more things that can throw you off. But yeah, so it's a difference in opinion, right? Like Jewel, I know loves individual tickers because he thinks it's a lot simpler. He can just sort of flick through his set of tickers and look for the best map he sees. And he doesn't have to look at Trinity, right? Which, yeah, to his point, sometimes it can be a bit confusing. Some days look very terrible. They're very choppy, like today. So in days like this, maybe individual tickers are easier to play, right? But but then there's going to be other days where you get caught super off guard by an individual map because the overall indexes are going completely opposite to your thesis, right? So on days like that, it would be better to be trading indexes. So it's up to you. Like I just if yes, the maps are simpler, but also be aware of the risks with doing just individual tickers, right? Is the war yeah, so I'd say the war is like playing a big part in it, but um it's hard to say, right? Like is it just the war, but or is it also something else? So it can be a mix, but yeah, I'll say the war is definitely not it's not helping at all. But there's always going to be weird periods of movement, right? So I mean, a lot of y'all are newer, but like end of year last year, right? December, like holiday periods. We had a lot of very low volume days, which are also very weird in their own way, where it was a lot of positive gamma, ranges were very compressed, and it was like a lot of rolling of floors and ceilings up and down. So it was a lot of very weird trend days where the range looked very small, but you'd get this reversal that would just sort of never, you get a pump upwards and you just never reverse back down very significant levels at all. So there's a lot of people that struggled big time because, once that move got going upwards, they were trying to short it. Um, but if you're not identifying very strong ceiling, like you're getting burned pretty bad. So I mean, there's always going to be intricacies regardless of what the overall, I guess, world situation is, right? So, I mean, obviously, right now we're in a war period, so it's a little bit more volatile. But even during low VIX days, they were tricky in their own way, because you have to be very precise on your entries, and a lot of times you weren't expecting these huge moves unless you caught that full trend, right? So yeah, I think part of it you can likely attribute to like world events, but then also part of it is, um, the given phases of the market also just fluctuate naturally over time. Yeah, it's a good point, Lerold, actually. Yeah, like I think one time I traded Rigetti and it was like I was down 80% by Thursday. And then I don't know what happened on Thursday, but it flipped. And then by Friday, it was up 80%, right? But obviously, like if you're sized not correctly, even if you are sized correctly, that's still like a pretty stressful thing to hold, right? Because you're just looking at it Wednesday and Thursday morning, you're like, well, I'm down 80%. Like this play's dead, right? But that one ended up working out fine, right? So it does require also a bit more discipline sometimes with individual tickers. Um, but I guess now they have like the 0 day expiration or 3 days a week expiration on Mag 7 and stuff. So I guess if you stick to the Monday, Wednesday, Friday with those, you have a few more options of zero DTE tickers that'll be pretty cheap and that you also don't need to like wait too long for those moves to occur. Trump's gonna hit Iran if no deal. Oh, yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with that. Uh, yeah, I mean, it's been Iran, this and that for a while, so we'll see. John. Oh, John, thank you. I had no idea. Oh, okay, so Saudi's taking hits. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot more sense on this drop. Thank you for that, John. Trust the process. The conversion. Oh, these pink lines? No, these are not private. Yeah. Wait, give me a second here. Yeah, I can send these links to you. Let me go. I'll just send them into Owls. I don't know if for anyone in Asgard, I can send you like the whole thread, but then anyone in Owls can't see that. So let me go find this message. So these were made by someone in Asgard. So yeah, always I have to credit OBEX trades. So yeah, let me send these into G or trust the process. I don't know what to call you, but I think I just sent it in the stage on Owls, so you should be able to see it there. Okay, so the only ones I use are the top two actually. I don't trade gold or silver, but in theory you can use those. So I use them to convert futures prices, but I also just use them to convert SPX price over to SPY just because I'm too lazy. And I don't want to open three charts if I'm seeing the same stuff. So that's why I have SPX and SPY just overlaid. Um, okay, yeah, but hopefully that helps. Yeah, for anyone doing futures, that's going to be big time help. Because I know converting all that stuff is a pain. Okay, let me see here. Better using the futures chart instead of going. Yeah, exactly, G. Yeah, I know. Like a lot of for levels, futures is actually a bit more accurate, right? And we don't, so we can see all the overnight price action and make sure we're taking that into account. Especially recently, like in the past, a lot of times overnight would be pretty choppy and range bound. So in those cases, it wouldn't actually matter. But in nowadays, since we're having so much news released overnight, we're getting huge amounts of movement. So there's a lot of more significant levels that are happening overnight, right? So I think it's actually gotten more useful to chart overnight price action recently with all the sort of news that we're getting by the time we wake up, right? All right. Blair, Trump's. Oh, um, can I post the link here? Yeah, Blair, give me a second. I can just send you the link to where it is in the Discord. If that doesn't work, Blair, DM me and I'll DM it to you, but that should work. All right, let me think here. Yeah, anything else from anyone? Any other questions? Uh, yeah, John, no problem. Yeah, John, if you so actually, John, go to heat seeker analysis, and if you go to the pinned messages, actually, just anything in that channel will be useful. But if you go to the pinned messages, I would recommend starting with what I sent on March 23rd. So start with the video links there, and I'm gonna send a message. There's another useful, how do I call this? There's another useful like training module that John Wicks built that I'll send out as an announcement as well. That I think anyone who's interested should go through that. It's really gonna help you. So yeah, John, actually the messages I have in that 323 message, just ignore the top two, the written stuff, because there's a much better document that was released late recently that I can send that to you. But all the video content that I have in that message is still 100% applicable, and I'd recommend that. All right, awesome. All right, anything else? Otherwise, I think for now I'll leave this here. If anyone else has any other questions, I can stay on a bit longer. And I will post this to YouTube as well. All right. Yeah, it seems not. So in that case, thanks everyone, anyone who joined, and then I'll go ahead and close this out and get it posted. So yeah, hope everyone has a good night and yeah, has a good rest of the week.